a safety pin, a smudge of lipstick on white satin, and a woman standing behind the counter who never raised her voice. Minjae pressed her fingers to the silk, squinting under the flickering fluorescent light. Her hands, coarse from years of starch and steam, moved with the careful grace of someone who touched delicate things only when necessary. Outside, rain tapped the window in slow, uneven rhythms, like someone changing their mind halfway through a knock. Before we begin, don't forget to like and subscribe. We truly appreciate every comment. Thank you so much. Now let's continue. The dress was expensive, too expensive for the kind of customer who usually wandered into her dry cleaner wedged between a liquor store and an aging barbershop in Teaneck, New Jersey. But it hadn't come alone. It had arrived on a Thursday afternoon, announced not by a bell but by perfume, loud and sweet, the kind that lingered long after the woman who wore it was gone. "Ugh, this place is still open." The voice, crisp, coated in contempt. She didn't need to turn to recognize it. Audrey Carrington. Minjae had only heard the name once, back when her son had still been alive, when the air in her lungs hadn't tasted like rust. It had been whispered in police stations, in grocery aisles, behind clipboarded hands at parent-teacher meetings. The mother was worse than the daughter, people had said, but the daughter had followers, a lot of them, and the daughter had cried on camera, and the mother had written a check. Case closed. Minjae had spent the next 4 years watching her son's name vanish from news articles like chalk under rain. But Audrey didn't recognize her. Not now, not here, not without the flash of headlines or courtroom benches. She was older now, mid-20s maybe, but still wore entitlement like a fur coat. She dumped the garment bag on the counter without meeting Minjae's eyes. "I need this pressed and steamed." "Not ironed, steamed," she said, her voice slicing each word like it was a commandment. "It's Dior. You know what Dior is, right?" Minjae nodded. She didn't speak. "Oh my God," Audrey laughed to the woman behind her. "I think she thought I said door." The second woman, a redhead with wide eyes and a nervous smile, tittered and looked at the floor. Audrey kept going. "Anyway, my wedding's next month. Influencer retreat in Italy. It's all sponsored, obviously, but I want everything perfect, especially this." She pulled the dress halfway from its cover and spun the hanger with a flourish. It was white, blinding, not soft white or ivory or anything human. The kind of white that begged for flaws to be exposed, layers of lace and tulle like spun sugar. But beneath it, stitched in, barely visible unless you knew where to look, was a tear, and a smear of something pink, like melted blush. "It got stained at a shoot," Audrey explained. "Can you fix that?" Minjae nodded again. Her voice had retreated somewhere behind her ribs. "Great," Audrey chirped, already halfway to the door. "And if you screw it up, I swear to God I'll ruin you. Online, everywhere." The bell above the door rang once as she vanished into the rain. Minjae looked at the dress again, not because she had to, because she couldn't look anywhere else. She picked it up with 2 hands, gentle but sure, and carried it to the back. Past the pressers, past the rusted metal racks, past the cot in the corner with the single pillow where she slept most nights after the late shifts. The room smelled of starch and old takeout and eucalyptus balm. She laid the dress on the table. She didn't sigh, she didn't cry. She simply stared at it, as if waiting for it to explain itself. And then she began. She started with the hem, tiny stitches, steam curling upward like ghost breath. The fabric was resistant at first, stubborn. It held the scent of someone who wore too much ambition, but Minjae had ironed out worse things than attitude. Later that evening, the door opened again. No perfume this time. Just the low creak of the hinges and the shuffle of worn shoes on linoleum. She looked up. A man stood at the entrance, mid-60s, maybe older, slender but slouched. A coat clung to him like it was part of his frame, faded wool, fraying cuffs, a missing button. His hair was silver at the temples and damp from the rain. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her, then at the coat in his hands. "Repair?" she offered. He nodded. "If it's not too much." His voice was soft, polished, and Korean. She paused, caught off guard. No one had spoken her language without stumbling in years. Her reply came automatically. "Iodiga jijajasoyo?" "Where is it torn?" He smiled faintly and turned the coat inside out, revealing a seam that had all but come undone. As she reached for the garment, he gently set a folded $20 bill on the counter. "For you," he said in English. "Too much," she replied, pushing it back. "Not for kindness," he said, and left. She watched him walk into the dark, coat slung over one shoulder like a story he wasn't finished telling. The next day, he returned, and the day after that, each time with the same coat, always a new tear, a missing stitch, a frayed pocket. Each time he thanked her in Korean. Each time he left something behind. An orange, a tea bag, a small note with a proverb scribbled in Hangul. She didn't ask why. Some people arrived as noise. Others arrived as questions. He was a question. By the end of the week, she stitched his name into her mind without asking, Mr. Park. He hadn't given it. But she had to call him something. The dress took 3 days, 3 days of careful steaming, thread-by-thread restoration, and one single addition. It was so thin no one would notice it. Not unless they looked closely. Not unless they were Korean. Not unless they knew what red thread meant when stitched into morning clothes. Min-jae knew. The story said the red thread connected those meant to meet. Across lifetimes. Across wrongs. Across silence. But in mourning garments, the thread was quiet protest, a defiance sewn in silk. Not loud, not cruel, but impossible to unsee once found. She worked in silence, save for the occasional hum of the steamer and the whisper of thread through fabric. When the dress was done, she wrapped it in its original bag and wrote the return date with her usual neat block letters. Audrey returned the next day, phone in hand, sunglasses inside. She didn't even look at the dress. "Thanks. I hope it doesn't smell like mothballs," she muttered, laughing to someone through her Bluetooth. The door swung shut behind her, and Min-jae let the silence return. That night, Mr. Park came again. No coat this time, just himself. She looked up in surprise. He held out a single red thread, not spooled, not tangled, just one strand. "Nugunga iji an hasoyo," he said quietly. Someone didn't forget. She didn't respond, but she didn't look away either. Saturday morning arrived in ribbons of cold light and wet pavement. The sun rose slowly behind a curtain of fog, its rays no match for the chill that clung to the sidewalk and the tired brick of the storefronts. Min-jae unlocked the shop with fingers still sore from a week of invisible labor. She rubbed her knuckles and stepped inside. The air greeted her with the usual blend: metallic heat from the steam press, faint vinegar from cleaning solution, and the sweet, stale aftertaste of microwave rice. She turned the open sign with her left hand while cradling a thermos of barley tea in her right. Outside, the world remained indifferent. Cars passed. A man walked his dog. No one looked twice at the shop, or her, until they did. The video surfaced that evening. Min-jae didn't see it at first, not until her neighbor's teenage daughter ran into the shop breathless, clutching a phone like it was a wildfire in her hands. Miss Min-jae, you're on TikTok. I mean, your dress is, look." She barely understood the girl's words, but the urgency cut through. On the screen was a live stream clip. Audrey Carrington at a pre-wedding party. Loud music, louder guests, champagne flutes, and Audrey spinning in her wedding dress for the camera. She twirled once, laughed, twirled again, and the camera caught it. Just as she leaned forward to clink glasses, the fabric shifted. A glint, a single strand of crimson threading its way through the white like a vein in marble. Subtle, elegant, but unmistakable. Someone zoomed in, froze the frame. "What is that?" the top comment read. "Korean symbol of mourning?" another asked. "Someone look this up. This is too specific to be an accident." And then, red thread in Korean funeral clothes, protest mourning. The clip was reposted. Again and again. Threads of commentary sprouted like weeds in concrete. First curious, then suspicious, then outraged. Some remembered. Some had screenshots of old headlines, long deleted but archived by people who didn't forget. Local teen dies in shoplifting incident. No charges filed. Mother of influencer denies targeting Korean student. Statement withdrawn after online backlash. A few users recognized the name. Fewer still connected it to the dress, but someone did. And then, the thread began to unravel. That night, Audrey Carrington's name trended for the wrong reasons. She responded the way influencers do, through video, bathed in soft lighting and fake tears. "I had no idea. I'm literally heartbroken if someone sabotaged my dress. This was supposed to be my moment." But the internet has a memory that stretches further than any apology. And some memories never left at all. Min-jae sat behind the counter still in her apron as customers trickled in the next morning. They didn't say much. Some offered quiet nods. Some just left coats or suits or dresses on the counter with a look that lingered too long. By noon, a reporter showed up. She was polite, young, Korean American. Her name was Ji-yoon Kim, and she had a press badge from a local outlet that barely paid its interns, but loved a story with teeth. "I'm not here to cause problems," Ji-yoon said, holding up both hands. I read the comments. I saw your name. I think there's something here people deserve to know." Min-jae hesitated. The old instinct was to shrink, to avoid, to let it pass like bad weather. But she didn't. Instead, she took a slow breath and nodded toward the cot in the back. "I have photo," she said softly. She pulled out a shoebox from beneath the cot. Inside were remnants, a pencil case, a faded soccer jersey, a postcard from a science museum her son had visited on a school trip. At the bottom, wrapped in an old receipt, was the photo. Her son, Daniel, 17, black hair falling over one eye, grinning with the awkward pride only a teenager could manage. Ji-yoon held the photo carefully. "He was accused, right?" she asked, gentle. Min-jae nodded. "He not steal. She say he steal, but he not. They chase him. He run. Fell." The words were stones in her throat, heavy, misshapen. Ji-eun listened, not just with ears, but with stillness, that rare kind of attention that didn't interrupt or rush. When Min-jae finished, she simply asked, "Can I write this? With your name?" Min-jae didn't answer right away. She looked toward the front window where the sun had finally cut through the fog, glinting off the glass. She thought of Daniel, of how his name had disappeared so fast, of how long she had hidden his photo. "Okay," she said, "but not about me. About him." The article ran 3 days later. The seamstress who stitched back the truth. It was soft-spoken but piercing. Ji-eun didn't sensationalize. She translated. She told the story the way it had happened, with the quiet violence of assumptions, the brutal silence of institutions, and the invisible threads of grief. Audrey Carrington's camp issued a cease and desist. The publication ignored it. People started leaving messages, notes taped to the window, small envelopes slipped under the door. One note read simply, "I see him now." Another, "Thank you for not letting them forget." And then came the man. Mr. Park. He entered without his coat for the first time. His posture was straighter, his face less shadowed. He held a small box in both hands, black lacquer with red inlay around the edges. "This was my sister's," he said in Korean. "She was a hanbok maker. She taught me thread is never just thread." He opened the box and revealed dozens of spools, some fine, some coarse, all colored, red, blue, white, gold, but one was wrapped in crimson silk, a deeper red than blood, more like dusk caught in cloth. "I thought you should have it," he said, "for next time." Min-jae accepted it with both hands, as tradition required. They didn't speak further. No need. That night, she didn't sleep on the cot. She went home. For the first time in years, she took the photo of Daniel out of the box and placed it in the shop's front window, beside a folded handkerchief and a strip of red thread. The window fogged slightly with the heat from inside, but the photo stayed visible. Clear, unhidden, seen. It started with a bouquet, a single sprig of plum blossom wrapped in brown paper, set quietly on the counter before Min-jae opened that morning. No note, no signature, just the flower, symbol of resilience, blooming even in the cold. By midday, there were 4. Not the kind of bouquets florists arrange, not symmetrical, not styled. A few stems tucked into tissue, a stalk of bamboo, dandelions, picked wild, lavender. They arrived one by one, sometimes left by a hand too fast to catch, sometimes pressed through the mail slot in silence. They weren't flowers, not really, they were witnesses. Min-jae didn't touch them. She placed them by the window near Daniel's photo, letting them dry naturally under the dusty beam of sunlight that filtered through the blinds. She said nothing to customers, but her hands moved steadier now, her back straighter, and when she swept the floor, she left the front door slightly open. One afternoon, a woman came in, middle-aged, with sharp cheekbones and a silk scarf tied tightly at her throat. She held a suit folded over her arm, her posture tense like someone entering a courtroom. "Is this the shop?" she asked. Min-jae looked up from the sewing machine. "I saw the story," the woman continued. "My son, he's Korean too, adopted, and I just wanted to say—" She faltered. Min-jae nodded. "Leave it," she said, motioning to the counter. The woman did, and before leaving, she placed a folded receipt beside the suit. Later, Min-jae opened it. Nothing written, just cash, and a small origami crane. She didn't spend the money. She folded the paper into another crane and set both beside the flowers. That week, business doubled, then tripled. Not all were there because of the story. Most just needed suits taken in, or hems adjusted, or blouses pressed for job interviews. But many lingered too long. Eyes flicked toward the window, toward the photo, toward the red thread now tucked into a shallow dish like an offering. And somewhere between those comings and goings, the city seemed to bend slightly. The owner of the bakery next door, who had once told Min-jae her signage made the block look low rent, now sent over leftover croissants. A man from the council stopped by to ask if she'd considered a new awning. "On us," he added quietly. Even the children who used to race by her door on scooters now slowed down, sometimes stopping entirely to peer into the window like it was an exhibit. Audrey, meanwhile, went silent. For 3 days, nothing, then a single post on a backup account. Cryptic, no comments allowed, it read, "They ruined everything, over nothing." It didn't go viral. A few days later, someone else posted a screen recording from a now-deleted live video. Audrey again, but different, frantic. "You don't understand," she'd said, mascara smudged. "They set me up. That dress, I didn't know. They put that there on purpose." The comments were brutal. You mean the woman whose kid your mom blamed? Still waiting on that apology. Maybe don't make your wedding a live stream if you've got ghosts in the closet. Audrey disappeared from social media after that. No announcement, no scandal, just absence. But Min-jae didn't follow it. She didn't need to. The thread had already done its work. One morning, she arrived to find someone had written on the window in chalk, just a single line: "Your grief stitched a truth we forgot." She left it there. That same day, Mr. Park came again. He didn't speak, just placed a paper-wrapped bundle on the counter. When she opened it, it was his coat. Freshly cleaned, pressed, repaired. Min-jae reopened the tiny fitting room she had once used only for prom girls and elderly men who couldn't lift their arms for sleeves. She scrubbed the mirror, rehemmed the curtains, replaced the cracked stool with a sturdy bench from a secondhand shop. She didn't know why exactly. Until one morning, a teenage girl walked in, alone, backpack slung low. She held a blazer 2 sizes too big. "For an interview," she mumbled. Min-jae took the blazer, nodded, and gestured toward the fitting room. "Try," she said. "I pin." The girl went in. When she came out, her hair was damp at the temples, nervous. It's not for a real job, just the mall." "Still job," Min-jae said, and knelt. She pinned the sleeves with care, adjusting one side, then the other. She looked up and saw the girl watching her in the mirror. "Is that your son?" she asked, nodding toward the photo. Min-jae paused, then smiled. "Yes." The girl nodded. "He looks kind." He was. "People suck," the girl said. Min-jae laughed. "Some, not all." After the girl left, Min-jae placed another spool of red thread by the window. Not to curse, not to shame, but to remember. The next customer was early, a man in a collared shirt with circles under his eyes. He needed a shirt repressed before a funeral. He didn't ask questions. He didn't look at the photo, but as he turned to leave, he paused. "Can I ask what the thread means?" he said, gesturing toward the display. Min-jae thought for a moment. "It mean something's not finished," she said. "But they not gone." The man nodded once, then left. The first snow came early that year. Fat flakes drifted like torn lace from the pale December sky, catching in the seams of sidewalks and the shoulders of wool coats. The town slowed. Tires whispered over slush. Shopkeepers salted their stoops, and in the dry cleaner's front window, a boy's smile looked out onto it all. Permanent now. Framed. Centered. Min-jae had trimmed the photo with care, matting it against soft gray paper and placing it above the dish of red thread. The flowers had dried to brittle wisps, but she left them untouched. Their silence said everything that needed saying. The chalk message on the glass had been wiped clean by time, by wind, by the brush of customers leaning close. She never rewrote it. Instead, she began to sew. Not just to fix, but to make. Scarves at first, then small drawstring pouches, each lined with a single red thread stitched inside the fold. Hidden. Personal. She didn't advertise them. They weren't for sale, but if someone asked the right question, she would offer one. No explanation. No receipt. Just cloth and memory. One morning, a letter arrived. Not an email. A letter. Cream envelope, postmarked out of state, handwritten address. She opened it slowly, inside, a note, carefully penned. "You don't know me, but I read about your son. I had a brother once who disappeared into silence the same way. The thread you placed, it reminded me. That morning can speak too. I hope your son knows he is seen. Thank you for stitching that into the world." No signature. She folded the letter and placed it under Daniel's frame. That night, she lit a small white candle on the windowsill. For him, for the ones no one remembered. The next morning brought something else. A familiar scent, sharp, sweet, artificial, perfume. Audrey Carrington stood outside the shop, hands buried deep in a long beige coat. She wore oversized sunglasses despite the clouded sky. Her shoulders hunched not from cold, but something else. She didn't enter right away, just stood there, staring through the glass. Min-jae saw her from the back room. She paused mid-hem, thread still looped through her fingers, then slowly stood and walked to the counter. The bell above the door finally rang. Audrey stepped in. For the first time, she looked human. No phone, no entourage. Just wine-bitten lips and cheeks blotched with cold. "I came to apologize," she said. Minjay said nothing. "I know it's too late. I know you probably hate me, or should, but I needed to say it. She stopped, swallowed. "I didn't know what my mother said. I didn't even remember your face that day. I was just—" She trailed off again. The silence in the shop was dense, intimate. It smelled of starch and tea and thread. "I'm sorry," Audrey whispered. "For what she did. For what I did after." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a velvet pouch. "I'm not asking you to forgive me. I had this made after I saw what you did." She placed the pouch on the counter and pushed it forward. Inside was a small charm, silver, smooth, shaped like a thread looped into a knot. Not fancy, not cheap, just simple, and beneath it a folded paper. Minjay didn't touch it, but she nodded. Once. Audrey didn't stay. She left quickly, like someone escaping a room after saying something they were afraid to hear out loud. When the door shut, Minjay picked up the charm, turned it over, ran her finger across its looped edge. She placed it beside the thread. That evening, Mr. Park came again. He looked older, not weaker, just farther along in something time-shaped. "You've been busy," he said, smiling faintly as he noticed the new cloth bags lined in baskets, the candle, the small ceramic dish now filled with spools of color. She poured tea. They sat in silence, like they always did. Comfort in the wordless spaces. He watched her for a while, then said, "You know, in the old stories, red thread connects souls, not just lovers, but people who are bound by purpose, loss, meaning." She nodded. "I think Daniel pulled his," he said softly, "all the way through time, and tied it to yours." She didn't cry, but she closed her eyes for a long time. That weekend, the shop was full. Not bustling, Minjay didn't allow noise to overpower her space, but full of movement. A mother picking up a suit for her son's graduation, an elderly man asking for a button replaced, a girl dropping off a dress for her first dance. Each left something behind. A word, a look, a kindness. The shop no longer felt like a waiting room for sleep. It was alive now, and Daniel, he lived in it, not as a ghost, but as a thread, woven between hems, caught in the folds of new stories. On Sunday night, she stood in front of the window alone. The snow had started again. She looked at her son's photo, then at the city beyond it. Light refracted through the window, bending slightly where a fresh red thread had been taped to the glass. Just a thin line. Quiet, but there. And for the first time in years, she whispered in Korean, just loud enough for no one to hear but him. "Nanun ajig neoril bonda. I still see you." Then she turned out the lights. The candle kept glowing, and the red thread, caught in the window pane, fluttered faintly in the draft. Still, unbroken,